The Tabby Diaries, Mildred and the Viking Saboteurs. My name is precious McFluffy-Butt, a name as resplendent as the fur I so meticulously groom. I am not merely a feline companion, but the keen observer, sly co-conspirator, and unwitting chronicler of the many exploits of Mildred, the mediocre witch. Though her spells are often half-baked and her potions slightly off-color, there's no denying her courage, nor her uncanny knack for finding trouble. This particular tale unfolds in the frigid heart of the Baltic Sea, where Vikings, from the Tsardom of Russia, create sabotage of the ocean's seabed, ensuing a tangled mess of undersea magical cables conspired to upend our relatively peaceful existence. It began on a gloomy winter's eve, with winds howling through the forest and the smell of salted fish wafting from Mildred's bubbling cauldron. Our quaint, slightly lopsided cottage perched precariously on the edge of the Baltic cliffs. I was lounging near the fire, luxuriating in the warmth, while Mildred fussed over what she claimed was an ancient protection spell. From my vantage point, it looked suspiciously like seaweed stew. Our cozy evening was interrupted by a frantic knocking at the door. Mildred shuffled to answer it, her crooked hat askew, and her robe trailing bits of dried herbs. A young lad, no more than 12 summers, burst inside, his cheeks red with cold and panic. "Mistress Mildred," he gasped, clutching his woolen cap. "The Vikings have landed near Koivala. They're destroying everything and searching for a witch who controls the sea." Mildred's brows furrowed. She turned to me, her ever-present confidant. "Precious, it seems we're in for another adventure. Fetch my staff." I sighed theatrically but obliged, dragging her staff from its corner with a flick of my tail. It wasn't the first time her mediocre reputation had landed us in hot water, and it likely wouldn't be the last. By dawn, Mildred and I had made our way to the cliffs overlooking the sea. Below us lay the village of Koivula, its thatched roofs barely visible through the morning mist. Further out, a Viking longship rocked ominously on the waves, their sails emblazoned with terrifying symbols. The large ship bore a fearsome crew, led by a man who could only be Ulfric Stormblade, a hulking brute with a braided beard, and an axe so large it could fell an oak in one swing. "That must be the leader," Mildred muttered, her eyes narrowing. She adjusted her hat, which was flapping dangerously in the wind. "But what's this?" Among the warriors stood a shaman, draped in furs and bones. He raised a staff of twisted wood, chanting in guttural tones. A plume of dark smoke spiraled upward, forming into the shape of a monstrous serpent. Mildred's lips pursed. "Mediocre sorcery at best," she sniffed. "Mediocre sorcery meets mediocre sorceress," I quipped, my tail flicking. "This should be entertaining." Mildred ignored me, raising her staff to the sky. "Ulfric Stormblade!" she called, her voice amplified by magic. "You trespass on these shores and threaten my people. Leave now, or face the wrath of the Baltic witch." Ulfric threw back his head and laughed, his voice booming across the water. "A hag on a hill? Is this the witch we seek? Show yourself, crone, or your village burns." Mildred frowned. "Crone?" she muttered. "Rude." I watched with amusement as she tapped her staff against the rocky ground. The wind picked up, howling with a ferocity that sent Viking shields clattering. Waves churned, rising to unnatural heights and rocking the longship like a toy. Ulfric's laughter faded as he barked orders to his crew. Meanwhile, the shaman resumed his chanting, summoning a second serpent from the smoke. This one dove into the water, heading straight for the cliffs. "Precious," Mildred said, her voice sharp. "Take care of that." I rolled my eyes but leapt into action. Bounding down the rocky path, I reached the water's edge in moments. The serpent loomed before me, its eyes glowing like embers. With a disdainful flick of my paw, I sent a ripple of magic through the air. The serpent froze mid-lunge, then shattered into harmless wisps of smoke. The Viking stared, slack-jawed, as I sauntered back up the path. Mildred smirked. Good work, Precious. Now let's deal with their little sabotage scheme. What neither the villagers nor the Vikings knew was that beneath the waves lay a network of undersea cables, enchanted by Mildred to maintain peace and prosperity across the Baltic. These were no ordinary cables. They hummed with ancient magic, connecting realms and fostering communication between allies. And now, according to Mildred's scrying glass, one of these cables had been deliberately severed. "A Russian fuel ship?" she muttered, pointing to a shadowy shape on the glass. "They've dropped anchor and dragged it across the seabed, cutting the rune weave strand. Typical gremlin mischief." I tilted my head. "And what do you propose we do about it?" "A little mischief of our own," she replied, her eyes twinkling. With a flick of her wrist, she conjured a small vial of glowing green liquid. "This will do nicely," she said, handing it to me. "Swim out to the ship and pour this into their rudder." "Swim?" I repeated, aghast. "Do I look like a fish?" "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she said, waving her hand. A shimmering bubble enveloped me, lifting me off the ground. "You'll be perfectly fine." Before I could protest further, the bubble whisked me toward the Russian ship. As I approached, I could see the anchor marks gouged into the seabed, leading directly to the severed cable. The crew was oblivious, too busy arguing over maps to notice a floating cat. Reaching the rudder, I poured the vial's contents into the water. The liquid spread like wildfire, transforming the surrounding seaweed into a tangle of writhing vines. Within moments, the ship was immobilized, its propeller hopelessly ensnared. Back on the cliffs, Mildred watched the Vikings trying to retreat, ensnared by the seaweed vines, their ships battered and broken by her storm. Ulfric glared up at her, shaking his fist. "This isn't over, witch!" he roared. "Oh, it is," she replied with a smirk. With a final wave of her staff, she sent a blast of wind that toppled their remaining mast. The shaman's staff splintered in his hands, and the Vikings scrambled to salvage what little dignity they had left. As the sun set, Mildred and I returned to our cottage, where the fire crackled warmly. She sank into her favorite chair, looking uncharacteristically pleased with herself. "Well, Precious," she said, scratching behind my ears. "I'd say we've earned our rest." I purred in agreement, curling up in her lap. For now, the Baltic was safe, its magic intact. But I knew, as surely as the moon followed the sun, that our adventures were far from over. Hark, noble viewers, and lend thine ears to my final meows of this tale. Thou hast journeyed with Mildred the Mediocre and I, Precious McFluffy-Butt, through storm and strife, magic and mirth. Yet many a tale still lies untold in these chronicles of Mildred and I. Pray tarry not, for thy journey needeth not end here. Seek ye out more of our adventures, be it battles with meddlesome sorcerers, daring rescues from the depths, or the folly of Mildred's half-cooked spells. Smite the subscribe rune below, ring the bell of notifications, and venture forth unto the realms of yonder videos. I, thy noble feline chronicler, await thee in future sagas. Fare thee well, loyal friends, until our paths cross again.